Description: a wonder falling down from heaven. A boy possessed by strange blood. Gods tremble. Demons flee. A boy from the land of Dongzhou. A pink skull as his sworn friend until death. A story of a determined warrior struggling for power. A legend that shakes the galaxy and disturbs the worlds of God, demon, and man. Chapter 1, The Boy from the Fishing Village. A remote fishing village, Quanzhou, Kaiyuan Prefecture, Deqi Kingdom. A richly ornamented carriage stood parked outside a shabby wooden cabin. Several armed men in black robes stood on guard around it. The villagers were swarming around the scene in excitement. They were talking to each other in whispers. Are they really from the Jin family, the Feng City's Jin family? Yes, I'm not mistaken. See that golden embroidery on their robes. No other family in the Kaiyuan prefecture wears it apart from the Jin family. This is unbelievable. Everyone had assumed that Shi Ting had died an untimely death. No one heard anything from him in the 10 years after he abandoned his wife and son. Everyone thought that he had probably fallen prey to some illness in some unknown land. But now, it seems that he has established himself with the Jin family, and has sent his men to get his son Shi Mu. It's a pity that the boy's mother has died. Otherwise, she would have enjoyed a life of wealth and prosperity. Wealth and prosperity? That's quite unlikely. Didn't you overhear the Jin family's soldiers' conversation that Shi Ting is now the son-in-law of the Jin family, and he wouldn't have dared to send his men for Shi Mu if the boy's mother was still alive? Nonetheless, Shi Mu's hardships will finally come to an end now. He was just an orphan until yesterday. But, he'll become a young master now. My father is seriously ill, and lies in bed. Moreover, I've a younger sister that I didn't know about. Shi Mu asked the blue-robed old man who stood in front of him in a tone of disbelief. The harsh sun and the winds from the ocean had turned his skin into a shade of auburn. This made him look a lot older than his 13 years of age. His features were strong, and made him stand out from his peers. His shabby shirt did little to hide his muscular stature, and added a fierce aura to his presence. That's right. The ailing master may not be too far from his day of doom. That's the reason why I've come here. Madam has asked me to bring young Master Shi back with me to bid the master goodbye at his deathbed, the man replied with a mild smile. Who's this madam that you speak of? My father abandoned me and my mother when I was a little child. There's no use of him coming back for me after all these years. You may leave. I'll not go with you to the Jins, the boy answered in a sour tone without any hesitation. Alas! I'm afraid that you young Master Shi have misunderstood my master. Master has faced several difficulties over these years. So, he couldn't come back for young Master Shi. It's his greatest desire to meet the young master in order to resolve the differences, and leave the past behind, the old servant explained. Humph! That man abandoned his own family. Nothing that you say can change this fact. You may leave now, the boy said in a cold tone. The blue-robed old man seemed to be in state of flux. He knitted his brows, and observed the boy's feature. He then spoke with a sense of decisiveness. Didn't the medicine that young Master Shi has been buying from the town's pharmacist seem unreasonably cheap? Hasn't the martial arts instructor of the town been charging the young master less than all his other students? Aren't the fish that are caught from the sea sold quickly and almost magically when young Master Shi goes to the town's market? Haven't there been quite a few customers haggling over the prices of the young master's fish? Do you mean to say that all these things have been arranged by that man? The boy asked in a blunt manner as his color rose. I don't know if it was master's idea. But, Madam had requested these arrangements in person, the servant answered with a smile. The boy started to look agitated and troubled as he heard these words. May I ask if you young Master Shi has been studying the art of body tempering? There's no doubt that young master aspires to be a true warrior. Madam was kind enough to secure an opportunity for young Master Shi to take the enrollment test of the Kaiyuan Martial Arts School, as long as there's an agreement to meet the master from his side. But, the final admission would depend on the extent of young master's talents and abilities. The man played his trump card. The Kaiyuan Martial Arts School, the boy repeated in a dumbfounded manner. He was moved by this temptation like any other boy of his age. Young master is a martial arts student. So, I'm sure that he must be aware that the Kaiyuan Martial Arts School is one of the 4 most prestigious schools. It enrolls students once in every 5 years. The candidates are required to meet 2 important conditions to be eligible for the entrance test. First, they must have finished studying the art of body tempering before they turned 15. Second, they are required to have grasped the essence of qi, which is essential for them to cultivate their real qi. It allows them to be able to circulate real qi easily through their meridians. It's impossible to be a true martial arts scholar without fulfilling these conditions. But, it's not easy to sense one's qi. A qi ling pill is required to induce one's qi into a flexible state. This pill costs a lot of money. Even the Jin family can afford only 10 pills at a time. I'm worried for young master's dreams and aspirations, since I can see that he wishes to fend for yourself. The old man spoke slowly, but with confidence. He ensured that his words were fully registered. The boy was silent for a long time. His voice was as cold as ice when he finally spoke. You may come back in 3 days for your answer. Good. It's settled then. I'll be back in 3 days for the good news, the blue-robed man said. He could sense that the boy had made up his mind. So, he bowed and left. Butler Cheng, why have you returned without the boy? We won't have to waste any more time if we take him by force, a rider spoke up once they had left the village. Nonsense. He may not be Madam's own son, but young Master Shi is Master's son by blood. We've been asked to bring him back safely, and of his own will. Otherwise, Master will not be happy. We'll lose our jobs if we end up upsetting Master, as Madam has great affection for him, the blue-robed man retorted in a sour tone. Ah, I'm sorry. I was being foolish, the rider mumbled. Suddenly, a shadow flashed in the distance. Then, a black-robed rider rushed to the old servant and bowed. Butler Cheng, we've found some Biao warriors sent by the 5th master. What should we do? He asked. Humph. It seems that the 5th master is sticking to his earlier plan. You'll not be able to handle the Biao warriors. I'll deal with them. Show me the way. Ask the rest of the men to wait here. I'll bring this foolish scheme to an end myself, the old man frowned and said. Yes, the rider said. He then advanced into the woods from the path that he had come from. The blue-robed man jumped off the horse, and started to follow him. His stature resembled a light feather. He disappeared in a flash. The other rider stayed back with the carriage. He didn't even dare to move a muscle. It was nearly evening. Shi Mu knelt before a tomb on an unnamed hill outside the village. The moonlight shone softly on the yellow tombstone, and illuminated what it read: the tomb of the Shi family's wife, originally surnamed Wang. Dear mother, you'll not believe what I'm about to say. Father isn't dead. He has married into some other family in an unknown land. But, you need not fear, as I'll fulfill my promise to you. Father had lied to you when he told you that he was leaving to pursue martial arts. But, I'll become a true warrior. Your son will be the strongest warrior the world has ever seen, so that you can rest in peace. The boy murmured a few more words to his mother's tomb. He then stood up. After that, he stretched his muscles, and started to exercise on the same spot. His body resembled that of a tiger's from afar. His movements grew faster with every passing second, the sound of the creaking and cracking of his bones could be heard from a distance. It became hard to see his frame in the cloud of dust that had been stirred up owing to his intense movements. Whiz! Suddenly, his figure charged and emerged from the cloud of dust. He then punched the trunk of a nearby tree. Bang! A thunderous sound echoed as the tree trembled with the impact of the blow. Several leaves fell from the tree. An impressive fist imprint could be seen in the center of the tree trunk. Shi Mu raised his eyebrows as he noticed the deep mark that his fist had left on the tree trunk. This series of movements was the first technique that he had been taught at the town's martial arts school. It was the most popular skill in the art of body tempering in the De Qi kingdom. His instructor had told him that one had to be at the 7th level of body tempering art to be able to leave an imprint as deep as the one that he had left. This meant that he only had to cross 2 more levels before he could start practicing qi sensing. It had taken him 4 years to reach the 7th level of the body tempering art. The saying that martial arts was only for the rich was indeed true. It had taken him 5 or 6 months to save up the tuition fee of 32 silvers once he had decided to study martial arts. This was a lowered fee, others had to pay an even higher fee for their training. He had managed to reduce the fee because of his relentless and sincere pleads. The exorbitant price of the medicine bath that was needed to temper his body had left him penniless. Shi Mu had been able to reach a remarkable level despite his poor situation. This had left the entire school astonished. Moreover, he had ended up gaining his instructor's respect and admiration. It was believed that Shi Mu was a natural warrior owing to his talent and physical stature. He had wanted to ask the school's pharmacist to prepare medicinal baths for him from time to time. But, he didn't have the required money. So, no one could afford to give him rare and expensive herbs. Therefore, he could bathe with only ordinary herbs. It did little to enhance his physical growth. Shi Mu sighed heavily as he knew that he hadn't been born with sturdy bones. There had been a stroke of luck 2 years ago, it had played a huge part in his achievements in the following time. He knew that this was partly the reason why he needed time to make his decision regarding whether he wanted to move with the jinns or not. He looked up at the moon as he was troubled by these thoughts. He then rushed down the hill. He arrived at the seashore near the groups of rocks. Suddenly, he jumped into the sea. He moved his arms swiftly like a giant fish in the deep sea. He swam 300 to 400 feet deep into the sea in a short span of time. Suddenly, he saw something spectacular. The pitch-dark sea began to glitter with a white light. The light gradually became brighter, and illuminated the entire area. Shi Mu wasn't taken aback. Instead, he held his breath, and started to swim downwards. He swam to a patch of sandy floor. He had reached the bottom of the sea, it was covered with white fine sand. Shi Mu saw that the glittering light was emanating from 10 shells, each of these shells was as big as a man's palm. A 70 or 80 feet high rock stood in the center of the circle of the shells, it was flickering in a continuous manner. Chapter 2, A Pearl Gifted by the Clam Girl. Translator, Novel_Saga Editor, Novel_Saga. Shi Mu didn't pay any attention to the glittering shells. Instead, he swam straight to the rock and raised his arm. Bang! A loud sound was issued as he pounded his hand on the rock. A blood-colored fog emerged from beneath the boulder, it swirled several times around the young boy with lightning speed. It then seeped into his body. Shi Mu's spirits were lifted. He exhaled a long breath. Surprisingly, he was able to breathe freely in the sea water, as if he was a fish. Shi Mu turned to the rock, and went to its rear side. He then dug out a rusty iron awl and a chisel with a lightning speed, he had hidden these things at that place earlier. After that, he made a hole at the bottom of the rock. He could see a clam trapped beneath the rock in the faint white light. It was as white as jade, its surface was as pure as the moonlight. It couldn't make any movement owing to the heavy rock on top of it. Shi Mu had chiseled out a hole on one side of the rock's bottom, it seemed to be moving with the ocean's current. He continued to expand the hole for another hour. Then, he became exhausted. He stopped his work, and knocked 3 times on the rock. A signal was communicated to the clam, it began to glow brighter with each knock. A puff of blood-colored fog escaped through a slit in the clam after the 3rd knock. Shi Mu's body absorbed the fog once again. After that, he was again able to breathe freely in the water. He then picked up his tools, and started to dig once again. Shi Mu had discovered the huge white clam trapped beneath the rock around 2 years ago. He had accidentally inhaled a puff of the blood-colored fog. He had then been surprised to find that he could breathe underwater for a short period of time after having inhaled it. He had understood that it wasn't an ordinary clam. So, he had brought a chisel and an awl from his home to dig the bottom of the rock in order to free the clam from beneath it. The clam seemed to be aware of Shimu's presence and intentions. It released fog on its own every time it became hard for Shimu to breathe. Then, Shimu was able to breathe freely again. This task had proved to be extremely difficult despite of the help from the clam. Shimu could breathe without any problem, but the sea made it hard for him to utilize his entire strength. It had taken 2 years to complete this task owing to the density, size, and weight of the rock. Shimu had come to understand through these years that the fog from the clam had some mysterious features. Shimu had been able to breathe freely for only a short period of time when he had inhaled the fog for the first time. However, he had inhaled more and more of it in the past 2 years. So, he could breathe for almost an hour in the sea now. Shimu was also intrigued by the fact that the strange fog had helped to make his body stronger than before. His growth in the art of body tempering had previously been stuck due to the lack of herbs. But then, he had managed to jump 3 levels to reach the 7th stage. But, this wasn't all. He was slowly beginning to realize that the fog was also enriching his mind, it was making him smarter and more mature than his peers. Otherwise, how could this 13-year-old boy hold his own in front of the blue-robed man with such composure? Shimu toiled away under the sea until late at night. After that, he returned to his village. He was extremely exhausted. But, he couldn't afford to rest before he had made another journey to the sea as he usually did. Now, he had a deadline. This meant that he needed to quicken his pace. So, he jumped into the sea the next day. He continued to work on the task all through that and the next day. Boom! Suddenly, a loud sound was heard. The boulder began to shake. Then, there was a violent shower of small lumps of stones. The rock cracked under its own weight, and tipped over to the side. Shimu had already chiseled out that side. The white clam's luster grew in intensity and girth as it began to struggle in order to escape from under the rock. That's it! Shimu exhaled with excitement, he was overjoyed. He then moved to the other side of the rock in order to avoid the falling stones. The creaking and cracking sounds continued for a while. The boulder had almost collapsed owing to the movements of the clam. Suddenly, an undercurrent hit the rock from the side that it was falling apart from. A series of loud explosive sounds were heard as the boulder began to collapse on its original spot. The white clam was pushed firmly into its place, it ended up getting trapped once again. No! Shimu shouted in an exasperated manner. He then lowered his body into the sand without thinking, his feet was digging half an inch deep into the sea floor. He punched the rock twice in quick succession with the fist technique that he had learned from the martial arts school. A couple of dull sounds were heard as Shimu's mighty blows stirred up the water's current. The rock was about to fall apart. The clam took advantage of the rock's slow movement, and escaped with a quick wiggle. It then disappeared into the sea. This action got shielded from the boy's eyes by a glitter of white light. Shimu stepped back. He realized that his fists were in great pain. In fact, his hands were badly injured. His body was in shock. He spat out some blood. Then, he fell unconscious to the ground. The huge clam slowly reappeared. Its shell began to open, and revealed a little girl. She held a blood pearl in her hands. The girl seemed to be 6 or 7 years old, but, she was only 3 inches tall. She had fair skin, and her eyes glittered like tiny stars. She wore a gauze belly band. She gazed at the unconscious boy and his bleeding hands, there was an expression of gratitude on her delicate face. She moved her lotus-like arms in order to lift the blood pearl. A circle of silver light waves burst out of the pearl, and spread in all directions. A series of shrill sounds were heard as an army of shells flowed and lifted the boy's body to the surface of the sea like an unstoppable wave. Suddenly, the surface of the water parted, and the boy's body surfaced above it. Then, the shells disappeared as quickly as they had come. They seemed to have plummeted back into the sea. The white clam emitted a silver light, and followed the boy. Its shells were wide open, the little girl could clearly be seen inside it. She saw that the boy hadn't yet recovered. She hesitated, and looked at the pearl in her hand. Her face revealed an expression of decisiveness. She then pushed the pearl towards Shi Mu. The pearl swirled above him. Then, it released a huge puff of blood-colored fog. The little girl appeared in the sea about 10,000 miles away several days later. She had grown taller, she now resembled an ordinary girl of her age. She stood with a beautiful middle-aged woman dressed in a blue robe. Both of them stood on a black turtle. The black turtle was traveling at a lightning speed on the surface of the sea, and was surrounded by stirring waves. It was as big as a house. The woman held the little girl's hand, her eyes were full of affection. She expressed her concern, and said, "My child, you wouldn't have been so lucky if you hadn't run into me. You're the heavenly clam spirit daughter, a born water adept. This happens only once in 10,000 years in the East Sea. Our East Sea clan must be destined for greatness. What's your name, my child? Where's your spirit pearl?" It's said that the heavenly clam spirit daughters carry a pearl of life, which is the ideal material to make an amulet. The little girl couldn't say anything else. She made hand gestures in an effort to answer the woman's questions. "Oh, so your name is Xiang Zhu. You're saying that you gave the pearl to someone who had saved your life? Well, it's a good thing to express your gratitude. Wait, your savior was a human? A man? You must remember that men are the least reliable creatures on this land. You must kill a man immediately if you see any. Come with me now. We must bring back the pearl." "What? The spirit pearl was corrupted because of some foreign blood at the bottom of the sea, and has since lost its power? Well, in that case, let the human boy have it. But do remember, you mustn't see him again," the woman said. The huge turtle took them further away into the sea. Their figures gradually grew smaller until they couldn't be seen or heard. Shi Mu's unconscious body burned with an overwhelming fever. His mouth was dry, and his tongue was parched. Suddenly, he jerked out of his sleep, and sat up abruptly with a shout. He realized that he was no longer in the sea, and was back at the silent beach. He was stunned as he looked at his hands. Smooth skin had replaced the torn skin and the bloody wounds on his hands. He felt some strange changes in his body. He could feel his blood flowing. A thought crossed his mind after a few moments of deep pondering. He then began to fumble through his clothes. He found a crystal ball near his chest, it was as big as his thumb. Shi Mu was taken aback. What could this be, he wondered aloud. He was sure that he had never seen or touched this thing before. Shi Mu wasn't aware of the fact that the blood fog that had come out of the clam was foreign in nature. Only 1/10 of the blood fog had been inhaled by Shi Mu in order to breathe under the water. The girl had forced the rest of it out to help heal his wounds. The pearl had lost its power the moment the girl had stopped to suppress the strange blood. Now, it was nothing more than a rare luminous pearl. Therefore, the girl had left it with Shi Mu. Shi Mu rolled the pearl in his hand for a while as he admired its texture and size. He felt its softness, and realized that it would be worth a treasure. So, he hid it safely in his clothes. He jumped into the sea after a little while to ensure that the clam had really escaped from underneath the massive rock. His heart became heavy with disappointment once he was convinced of it. He then left for his village. The blue-robed man returned to the fishing village to talk to Shi Mu. A black carriage guarded by black-robed riders was seen galloping out of the village after a short while. It was headed in the direction of the Feng city. Chapter 3, Ant Zhen. Translator, Novel_Saga Editor, Novel_Saga. The Dachi Kingdom stood in the neighborhood of the Yan and the Huang Kingdom. Its territory was within a peninsula that protruded out from the eastern lands. The eastern sea lay to its east, and a wasteland belonging to several barbarian tribes lay to its west. The three kingdoms had been allies since hundreds of years so that they could fight with their common foe. The Duchy kingdom lay in the middle of the peninsula. So, it was jammed between the other two countries. It had the strongest military. It claimed that its standing army consisted of 1 million soldiers. The Huang kingdom's military was ranked second in strength. The Yan kingdom's military was considered to be the weakest. The Duchy kingdom's capital area was directly controlled by its central government. The kingdom had 9 prefectures apart from this area. These prefectures had been subdivided into 36 districts. Each district administered 10 odd cities. No one was aware of the exact number of towns and villages in the kingdom. Feng City was the capital and the largest city of Quanzhou. It was possibly the 5th largest city in the entire Kaiyuan prefecture. The Jin clan was considered to be one of the most influential clans in Quanzhou owing to the large number of fields and manors held by them on the outskirts of the city. Their main export items were medicines and ores. So, they were able to influence almost half of the events in Quanzhou. Jin Cheng, the blue-robed butler, gave this information to Shi Mu on their way to Feng City. He enjoyed a high status among the servants since he was the diplomatic butler of the Jin family. He was at the very least well respected by the Jin family's riders. They had to go through 2 cities to reach the Feng City. It took them almost a month. They went through the city gate, and headed towards the northwestern part of the city. Shi Mu stared out of the carriage window at both sides of the streets. Shi Mu's entire world before setting out on this journey had been the small fishing village that he had been born and brought up in. The nearby village was the largest city that he had ever been to. Feng City lived up to its status of being the largest city in Quanzhou. The crowded streets were a scene of complete chaos. The townspeople walked past various kinds of buildings. Their carriage gradually slowed down. But, it took them another hour to reach their destination in ordinary-looking manner. Shi Mu noticed a white fan hanging from the side of the gate as he got down from the carriage. But, his expressions didn't change. He followed the blue-robed old man through the gate and into the manor. The riders stayed back, and stood beside the carriage. Shi Mu soon arrived in a hall. A memorial ceremony was being held there. The hall had dull white streamers and linen all around. A 10-year-old girl stood with a married woman inside the hall. Both of them wore the traditional white dress of mourning. The woman looked around 30 years of age. Her appearance was natural and graceful. She half reproached Shi Mu with tears streaming down her face as soon as she saw him. "Too late. You're too late. Your father passed away the day before yesterday. I don't know what you think of him, but you're his true son. Come and see him. We can talk about other matters later on." The young girl had red and swollen eyes. She seemed extremely sad. Her face expressed a tinge of curiosity and eagerness as she saw her half-brother for the first time. Shi Mu gazed at the black coffin that lay in the middle of the hall. His mind was still struggling to make sense of the whirling mess that these rapid series of events had caused. The woman stopped scolding the boy as she followed his gaze. The blue-robed butler seized the opportunity to approach her. He then whispered something in her ear, and retired quietly. Shi Mu managed to move forward after a long while. He walked to the coffin and spoke in a calm voice, "Open the lid. I wish to say goodbye to my father." 2 burly men approached the coffin from the hall. They pushed it open as the woman clapped her hands twice. A man lay quietly in the coffin. His features resembled that of Shi Mu's. Shi Mu's face became pale and dull as he lowered his head and gazed at the body. He only moved after a long time had passed. He then took out an ordinary-looking bronze mirror, and placed it beside the body without uttering a single word. "This is," the woman furrowed her eyebrows and said. "I don't know why he abandoned my mother, but it was her last wish to have this mirror buried with my father," Shi Mu answered slowly. He then turned to light an incense stick in the burner in front of the coffin. After that, he kowtowed 3 times in front of his father's coffin. The woman hadn't expected this. But, she didn't stop Shi Mu from gazing at the coffin with a forlorn look on his face. She finally waved her hand, and the 2 burly men closed the coffin. Follow me. This is not the place for us to talk. Your father wanted you to know something before he died, the woman said. Then, she led him and the girl to the adjacent smaller hall. Shi Mu raised his eyebrows. However, he followed her silently. The woman turned to the boy once they arrived in the adjacent hall. She then said, "It seems that I haven't wasted my time in asking Butler Cheng to bring you here. You've already kowtowed to your father. I'll not ask for anything more. I'll not ask you to call me mother either, you may call me Aunt Zhen. This is your half-sister Yu Huan. Yu Huan, come and meet your brother." "It's nice to meet you, Brother Mu," Yu Huan greeted him in a clear and melodious voice. The girl had curved eyebrows that sat atop her large eyes. Her mouth was delicate, and stood out in contrast with her prominent nose. She looked cutely clever and mischievous as she moved her eyeballs. The stiff expression on Shi Mu's face gave way to a forced smile as he nodded to the girl. "Your father married into the Jin family, but he possessed his own manor in the suburbs. This wealth can only be accorded to him. And, it's yours since you're his son. I only wish to live with Yu Huan in this manner. I'm a Jin, and I have no need for this money." One of the reasons why he died so young was because he had made a huge contribution to the Jin family. The reward for his contribution hasn't come yet. Now, you have two choices as his successor. The woman paused for a moment. Shi Mu looked at her in surprise. "I can arrange for you to receive a Qi-Ling pill from the Jin family as the reward. It'll provide you with an opportunity to pass the enrollment test of the Kai-Yuan Martial Arts School, or I can arrange for you to be awarded a title of nobility. Of course, the Jin family won't be able to give you a title of high nobility. But, it'll ensure that you stay rich all your life, even your sons and grandsons will benefit from this reward." The woman looked into Shi Mu's eyes as she spoke in an earnest manner. "A real title of nobility?" Shi Mu knitted his brows and asked. "That's right. There are 5 levels of titles in the De Qi Kingdom. Each of them comes with its respective status and power: Gong, Ho, Zi, Nan, and Sun. Your father's contribution and Jin's influence will be able to secure a title for you without any difficulty. In fact, we can even offer to make you an official in the court," the woman explained. "I don't care about the titles, I'll take the Qi-Ling pill," Shi Mu replied without any hesitation. "Consider the offers carefully before you make your decision." "I'd take the second option if I were you," the woman said with caution. She seemed surprised by Shi Mu's answer. Shi Mu took a momentary pause. He then said, "What do you mean by that? How much do you really know about being a warrior, and Qi?" the woman asked bluntly. "Are you trying to say, Aunt Zhen, that are you a warrior yourself?" Shi Mu was surprised. The woman didn't answer. Her figure flickered and appeared near a wall in a moment. She then lifted her arms. A gold-tinged sword appeared in her hands, it seemed ready to strike. The woman moved the sword with a loud crashing sound, it seemed as if the heaven itself was being pierced. The rapid movement of the sword made several illusory images in the air. Then, the sword found its way back in the wall with a clean and cold sound. Its hilt hung out, it was still shaking. Shi Mu was amazed. "Don't judge me by my appearance. I'm one of the 3 advanced Houtian warriors of the Jin clan. How else will I be able to get you the exorbitantly priced Qi-Ling pill from the Jin family? One may not get an opportunity to do so even if one has the money to buy it. But, a dead man is quickly forgotten by the living. There are a few members of the family who believe that your father's contribution doesn't deserve a reward such as these rare herbs. So, there will be irritation and disdain if you ask for the Qi-Ling pill. I can help you this time, but I'll not be able to do so in the future. I'm determined to be a warrior, and I'll do whatever it takes," Shi Mu replied without pausing. "I'll not persuade you further, since I see that you've made up your mind. Tell me the different levels of warriors, to the best of your abilities," Aunt Zhen sighed and said loudly. "The various levels are the tempered body, the real warrior and the national guardian. I've heard that one is ranked equally with the aristocratic ministers after they've achieved the national guardian level, Shi Mu answered. You were taught this at the village school? That's not bad. But, you must understand that even the best instructors at those martial arts schools are nothing in comparison to real warriors. How can you expect to learn the real division of levels from them? Aunt Zhen said. She was not surprised by Shi Mu's answer, she seemed to have predicted it. Please teach me, Aunt Zhen, Shi Mu requested. Commoners use titles such as the Tempered Body, the Real Warrior and the National Guardian. The real levels of warriors in Dongzhou are differently organized. The true titles are Martial Disciple, Houtian Warrior, and Xiantian Warrior respectively. Any disciple is allowed to study the art of body tempering at the beginner's level. But, one may not be able to accomplish much in life without the gift of fine bones. Those who have perceived real qi and are able to practice real qi arts become Houtian warriors. They can match 100 armed men when aided by real qi. These are what commoners like you call the real warriors. The Xiantian warriors can make use of their innate qi. This can only be achieved by establishing deep connections into their danshan, once their qi quality and control has reached a certain level. These Xiantian warriors are the best of the lot. If it takes 10 martial disciples to kill one Houtian warrior, then even hundreds of Houtian warriors will fall short of bringing any harm to one Xiantian warrior. This is due to a Xiantian warrior's ability to use his real qi to manifest outside the body in order to kill from a distance. There is a qualitative difference between a Houtian warrior and a Xiantian warrior, it's a wall which is impossible to cross. But, very few people will ever be able to reach the point of becoming a Xiantian warrior. As per my understanding, there are only 7 or 8 Xiantian warriors in all of the De Qi Kingdom, Aunt Zhen explained. Chapter 4, The Manner. Translator, Novel_Saga Editor, Novel_Saga. 7 or 8 isn't a low number. It's a lot. Do you have any idea how much it costs to train a Xiantian warrior? An unthinkable amount. There's no guarantee of the desired outcome even with this kind of an investment. A very few people are able to reach the Xiantian level, Aunt Zhen sighed and spoke with a bitter smile. The boy sank into a deep silence. Well, there's still a lot of time for that. The entire nation would be at your service if you ever managed to reach that level. Even the Emperor of De Qi would be polite and favorable to you. That's why, the topmost warriors are called the National Guardians. Let's discuss the art of body tempering and qi sensing for now. Which level are you on? The woman asked. The 7th level, Shi Mu replied with pride. Shi Mu with his talent and abilities would indeed benefit if he could learn some qi sensing, and get enrolled into the Kaiyuan martial arts school. The 7th level? That's a decent achievement. The enrollment process at the Kaiyuan martial arts school will start next year. You must reach the 9th level to be eligible for that. Do you think you can do that? I wasn't sure earlier, but now I'm beginning to realize that I can, at least to a certain extent. Shi Mu thought for some time. He then said in a positive manner. Reaching the 9th level and sensing one's real qi are the basic requirements for everyone. Besides that, you'll also have to prove your worth by competing fiercely with the other candidates, the woman said in a strange tone. Shi Mu listened carefully. I've heard that the number of talented candidates this year is more than usual. Some of them have already tempered their bodies to the 9th or even 10th level. It's true that the higher levels are able to sense qi more successfully. It has been seen in the past that less than 1/10 of the total candidates are able to sense qi even with the aid of the Qi Ling pill. Mostly the martial disciples in their 30s or 40s are able to manage this, that too with great difficulty, and with the help of innumerable Qi Ling pills. The applicants at the Kaiyuan martial arts school need to be between the age of 10 and 15. It's because one is unable to temper one's body before the age of 10 as the body's bones aren't yet shaped properly. 15 is the age at which one loses one's potential for further accomplishments. So, any efforts to continue training would be in vain if one hasn't tempered one's body by this time. The Feng city boasts of many accomplished warriors. But, less than 100 of these warriors have the opportunity or the talent to make it to the upper levels. Our Jin family was blessed to have an advanced Houtian warrior as our ancestor. It's partly because of his reputation that the Jin family has managed to assert its prominence in Quanzhou. A wave of pride appeared on the woman's features as she said. Shi Mu couldn't get the woman's words out of his head. His ears kept echoing with the words that reaching higher levels make chi sensing easier. Moreover, the figure 1/10 stayed with him. He took a deep breath to calm himself down. He hadn't assumed that everyone who took a Qi Ling pill successfully achieved chi sensing. But, he hadn't expected that the chances would be this low. You can still change your mind if you're regretting your decision. Aunt Zhen looked at the boy and smiled. No. I've made up my mind, Shi Mu shook his head and said. In that case, take this suburb manor's title deed. Jin Cheng our butler will live with you there, and assist you if you need anything. The Qi Ling pill that the Jin family has ordered will come in a year's time. I'll let you know when it arrives. You should take it upon yourself to learn martial arts besides the body tempering in order to duel in the real fights for the enrollment test. The Jin family has a unique martial arts manual in its possession. But, only the Jin family members are allowed to learn from it, Aunt Zhen nodded and advised. Thank you, Aunt Zhen, Shi Mu said with gratitude. Shi Mu left the manor after a quarter of an hour. He held a wooden case in his hand. He seemed quite puzzled. The wooden case contained his late father's properties and belongings including the deed to the big manor in the suburbs, 3,000 liang of silver notes, 45 or 60 hectares of fine farmland near the manor, and a well-located restaurant in the city. He had gone from being a poor village boy to a rich young man in less than a day's time. A middle-aged man paid a visit to the manor shortly after Shi Mu's departure. He seemed to be extremely angry. He started to question Aunt Zhen in a violent manner. Seventh sister, how can you give the only Qi Ling pill to an outsider over your nephew? Father had promised me this in person. Do you have any objection to father's decision? I do have objections with our dealings with the Biao brothers. But, that's not the cause for my visit. That boy isn't a Jin. Why should an outsider benefit from the pill that we've obtained with so much difficulty? Father will not refuse you, if you were to change your mind. You're aware that your nephew couldn't achieve Qi sensing last time. So, it's essential that he takes advantage of this opportunity. He has finally reached the peak of his development. It's also the year of the enrollment at the Kaiyuan Martial Arts School. He'll have regrets his entire life if he misses the enrollment. The middle-aged man's long face expressed his anger and frustration. His eyes seemed to be spouting flames. He almost blew his top with rage. Humph! An outsider? He's the only flesh and blood of my husband, the same man who saved half of the Jin family's properties. Does this answer satisfy you, Brother Wu? Aunt Zhen retorted bluntly. Well, if you still wish to favor an outsider, who has no blood relation with you, then I've nothing more to say. I'll not plead with you anymore. Neither will I hold back in obtaining a Qi Ling pill for your nephew myself, he said. Then, he rushed out in a rage. Mother, will you let Uncle Wu disrespect you, and walk away so easily? Yu Huan emerged from a hidden spot after the man's departure. She then blinked her eyes and asked. No harm has been done. You're aware that your cousin's talents as a warrior aren't quite up to the mark considering the number of herbs that he had to use to manage his body tempering. A Qi Ling pill wouldn't help him much with his Qi sensing. Your uncle had to ask me for it since this was his last hope. That's true. Shi Mu is far more talented than Jin Tian. Jin Tian would have a very low chance at being enrolled even if he were to manage Qi sensing. Yu Huan gloated and clapped her hands. Haha, it seems that you've already started taking your step-brother's side. But, I'm not yet sure about Shi Mu's abilities. Still, I've done everything I could for your brother. Any more help on my part would anger the family. I have a good impression of him even though we met for the first time. He's much better than those Jin family's idlers, Yu Huan grinned and said. The fact is that your grandfather promised to give Shimu a Qi-Ling pill only because of you. After all, you were the one who sensed Qi at the tender age of 12. Moreover, you've managed to reach the 10th level since that time. Your grandfather expects a lot from you, little one, Aunt Zhen said with a smile. Don't worry, I'll surely complete my studies of sword art in 1 year. After that, I'll have no difficulty in getting enrolled into the Kaiyuan martial arts school. I'll not let grandfather down, the young girl replied with confidence. The woman nodded, her eyes reflected extreme affection for her daughter. In a manor 10 miles away from Feng City, Shimu stood in the middle of a square. It was surrounded by houses on all sides. He looked around with a contented expression on his face. He had spent his entire life in a small hut in a tiny fishing village. So, this spacious square was a wonder for him. He was overjoyed to see that the manor carpeted a space of at least 4 to 5 acres, and had over 20 rooms. He turned his gaze to the 20 or so servants and the tenants that stood in front of him. Who looked after the manor and the fields before my arrival? He asked. Young Master Shi, I did, a sandy-haired middle-aged man in a clean shirt answered in an obedient manner. What's your name? Are you a local? Shimu asked as he observed the man. He finally decided that he seemed quite honest. The name of your humble servant is Zhang Suo. My family has lived here for 7 or 8 generations, the man answered with great respect. Good, I'll leave you to do your old job. The same goes for the rest of you. So, do your usual work, and pay the same rent. Also, inform the restaurant's manager to meet me here tomorrow, Shimu gave his orders after a brief thought. Yes, young master, Zhang Suo answered quickly. He was relieved that his fear regarding the changes in the arrangements had turned out to be baseless. The other servants and tenants also breathed a sigh of relief. They bowed to the boy to show their appreciation. Shimu turned to the blue-robed old man at his side once everyone had left. He then asked, Have I made the right decision, Butler Cheng? Well done, young Master Shi. You settled the matters very well. It amazes me that you were born in a fishing family, the old man answered with a smile. I was quite surprised myself, as it feels very different to ask people to do things for me. I would like to ask a favor of you, Shimu said with a tinge of unease. Anything, young Master Shi. I'll assist you in any way that I can, he said quickly even though he was surprised. All right. I wish to learn from an expert martial arts instructor, someone who can teach me personally. Is there anyone you have in mind, Butler Cheng? Oh, all the 4 martial arts schools in Feng City are quite famous. I would like to learn a martial art apart from the art of body tempering, the boy added. In that case, I would recommend instructor Li Qinghai from the Lu Feng Martial Arts School. He's well known for practicing rare skills. What kind of martial arts does the young master prefer? The old man questioned him after some thought. I used to chop a lot of wood back in my village. So I think a saber art would suit me best. The Lu Feng Club's 13 series of Gale Force blade art and the stone-breaking fist is quite famous. But, it's extremely expensive to be privately trained, the old man said after thinking for a moment. If it's really worth the money, then so be it, Shimu said. He felt like a rich man with 3,000 liang of silver notes. I see. The first thing that I'll do tomorrow is to invite instructor Li here, the blue-robed old man replied with a smile. Chapter 5, Li Qinghai. Translator, Novel_Saga Editor, Novel_Saga. 3 months later, in the suburban Manners Square, Shimu was practicing under the hot blazing sun with a meter-long blue blade. It left traces of its glitter in a circumference of dozens of meters as he waved it back and forth. Eye-catching straw men could be seen strewn around the square unlike 3 months ago. A row of wooden shelves and some stone locks held a few commonly used weapons like knives and spears. Stop! A man's rude and abrupt voice thundered. Shi Mu paused, and pulled back the blade. That's quite decent. You've finally begun to get the hang of the 13 series Gale Force blade art. But, it won't help you much in a real fight since this is the basic level. You still have a long way to go, the man said. He stood at one side of the square with folded arms. His sharp eyes and bronze skin made him look experienced and able. I wouldn't have been able to understand such a mysterious art in mere 3 months, if it hadn't been for Master Li's personal training, Shi Mu answered with great respect. The bony man was an intermediate Hotian warrior. He was none other than the well-known instructor Li Qinghai from the Lu Feng martial arts school. Instructor Li Qinghai had displayed a single movement in front of Shi Mu 3 months ago. Shi Mu had been extremely amazed to see it. The boy had saluted the instructor, and had asked him to train him. Shi Mu had since been practicing martial arts for 4 hours every day under Li's guidance. This series of blade art must seem quite elementary to you. It's mostly used by the warriors of the disciple level. But, some of the higher level techniques can be used in real fights as well, even after becoming a Hotian warrior. So, don't take this lightly. The key is to use wind for making each strike swifter than the previous one. I once used this simple yet profound art to kill 2 warriors of the same level as mine, and that too within the time that it takes for an incense stick to burn down. The most complex art available at your level is the Lesser Heavenly Sword art. It consists of 306 movements. Very few warriors are truly able to understand all of them within their lifetime, Li Qinghai explained. Shi Mu reflected for a while. He then asked, Master, you once said that the 2 components of martial arts are techniques and cultivation. Techniques deal with the methods to kill, while cultivation is the art of chi sensing and body tempering. One can't be used without the other, as they're in perfect harmony. But, which of them would you deem more important if they're weighed against each other? You're thinking a lot, little kid. But, this question has been asked repeatedly, since ancient times. Every warrior has his own understanding of this matter, but I believe that you'd limit yourself to a great extent if you only learn the techniques. It would resemble a head made out of lead, and legs made out of jelly. You wouldn't be able to stand. If you focus all your energy in learning cultivation, then even a beginner could succeed in killing you despite the amount of real chi you may have. It would be like getting a cow to plow the field without a yoke to harness the power. Only a Xian warrior can protect his body through his real chi. No ordinary weapon would be able to harm him, even if he stood in a single spot without moving a muscle. Such a warrior can even use his real chi to shake weak men to their deaths. That's not all. A Xian warrior can outlive a 100-year-old ordinary man by another 100 years, Li Qinghai snickered and explained. So, the master believes that cultivation to be more important, Shi Mu said with a smile. Many difficult arts require both cultivation and techniques. When you reach a certain level, you'll see that your cultivation will be coordinated with certain techniques. The 2 are as inseparable as yin and yang. It doesn't make any sense to compare them with each other. But, the first task for disciples like you should be to work on your cultivation in order to strengthen your body as well as your general abilities. You'll never be able to grasp the intricacies of any rare martial art without chi sensing, even if you get a chance. Moreover, each martial art has a requirement for cultivation, especially for the high levels. It'll be a disaster if you attempt to learn an art which is beyond the scope of your current level. Your own cultivation would be damaged. It would either mean that you'd never be able to cultivate again or that you'd get killed because of a chi rebound within your own body, Li Qinghai explained in a disapproving manner. I see. Can you show me the 13 series of Gale Force blade art again? Shi Mu nodded and asked. It takes a lot of energy to display these movements. I wish to teach you the stone-breaking fist today. So, I'll only show you one more time, Li Qinghai frowned. He seemed to be grudging his agreement. But, he granted Shi Mu's wish since he was an obedient disciple. Li Qinghai then walked to the middle of the square, and emitted a powerful sound wave with the help of a noise which couldn't have been louder than a whisper. He then began to display the swift movements. Multiple slicing sounds were heard in the square within a second. The silver blade's motions created an illusory blur like that of a long white whip. He began slowly. But, each of his movements exceeded the previous one in swiftness. After that, everything blurred into a silver light. It was accompanied by the pressure of a light breeze. Shi Mu watched with great concentration. The cold silver light moved in the direction of a wooden target on one side of the square. It then swirled towards the stalk with a loud noise. This was followed by a strong wind. Suddenly, the wind stopped, and the cold light melted into the daylight. Pa! Pa! The target broke into 7 parts as a number of bold thuds hit it in the middle. Then, the broken parts fell to the ground. The movements didn't look extraordinary. But, there were 6 cuts in the disguise of 1. Master has really attained perfection in this blade art. After all, he achieved 6 cuts in one movement without even using his real chi. Shi Mu let a long sigh and clapped his hands. I could have managed 9 if I had used my real chi. A fully accomplished person can achieve 13. It's a pity, but I'm far from perfection. There's a rumor concerning this blade art, that it belongs to the Xian Tian level. It's said that it was divided into 13 series. This lessened its power, and it dropped to the level of the martial disciple. Of course, it's nothing but a rumor. It wouldn't have been leaked if it were actually a Xian Tian level art. Millions would have attempted to restore it. Li Qinghai smiled lightly. 13 cuts in one single movement? Who would be able to resist the power of such a high-level technique? Shi Mu said. He was astonished. You'd be able to outshine all the Houtian warriors, and maybe even a few Xian Tian warriors, if you indeed achieve 13 cuts. But, these things can be put on hold for now. Now, I'll show you the key to this blade art for the last time. After that, we'll move on to the stone-breaking fist. It may seem as if this art consists of 13 parts. But, you'll understand how to use the power of the wind to your advantage with practice and precision. Each cut would be quickened and built on with the wind. It would make you reach such a high speed that nothing will be able to resist it, Li Qinghai said with an earnest look on his face. Shi Mu listened attentively as he tried to memorize every detail. Well, that's it for the 13 series of Gale Force blade art. Let's move on to the stone-breaking fist. The fist art is different from the Gale Force blade art, as it only requires strength. Its movements can be easily achieved by inducing power with your fists. As its name suggests, you can break any stone with your bare fist once you fully master this technique, Li Qinghai said. He approached a stone and took a deep breath. The stone was as big as a basin. He then kicked the stone in a crazy manner. Bang! A thunderous sound was heard. His kick sent the huge stone flying into the air even though he had a bony frame. Roar! He let out a shout as he pounded in the air. His skinny figure seemed thrice as strong now. It resembled an imposing tiger. Boom! Another thunderous sound was heard. It was followed by a shower of broken stones flying in all directions. Shi Mu's glittering eyes widened with amazement. Listen! Regardless of whether you practice the blade or the sword technique in the future, it's always a possibility that you might run into situations where you'll not have a weapon with you. Then, the only thing that you can rely on is your fists. This fist art may be simple, but it's sufficient enough. Your proficiency in this art will lay a strong foundation for other fist and kicking techniques. It's well known for its power, but only a few people decide to learn it because of the pain one has to go through to reinforce one's fists. This art takes much of one's strength. So, it'll yield twice the fruit for half the effort for someone born with great strength. I didn't use my real chi in that punch like before, Li Qinghai said with an expressionless face. I wonder about Master's present strength, Shi Mu blurted out. Me? I can easily lift a 250 kg stone boulder without using chi. He walked straight to the second largest stone block. It was half the size of a man, and looked extremely heavy. He let out a shout. After that, he lowered his body, and grasped the rock with both his arms. He then lifted the stone above his head. Shi Mu began to hurl praises at his instructor. There was a sense of pride on the bony man's face. It was a fact that only a few Houtian warriors in the Feng city could have managed to lift such a heavy stone boulder only with their body strength. Li Qinghai left the manor after an hour. Shi Mu stood alone on the square. He held a thumb-sized medicine bottle and a white book in his hand. This medicine had been made by Li Qinghai to help Shi Mu with the practice of the fist art. The book contained its secrets. Shi Mu glanced at the bottle. He then opened it, and smelled it. After that, he put it away. He then sat down on the grass in order to go through the book. Shi Mu was a poor orphan. He wouldn't have known to read a single character if an old scholar near the fishing village hadn't taught him for free for several years. Shi Mu browsed through the pages of the book. He then looked at the bottle in his hand. A look of surprise surfaced on his face. The greater the strength, the better, the boy murmured to himself as he put away the book and turned to look at the nearby stone locks. He then walked over to the largest stone lock. It was as big as a table. It was nearly twice as big as the one Li had lifted earlier. It must have weighed at least 500 kilograms. Shi Mu lowered his body. He then moved his right arm in place, and tried to lift the stone. A loud boom was heard as Shi Mu lifted the monster-sized boulder over his head. He had done the task with a single hand, as if the stone lock weighed no more than a feather. Chapter 6, The Mutation. Translator, Novel_Saga Editor, Novel_Saga. This is easy. I know I can do better. Shi Mu thought to himself as he prepared to lift another stone. He then raised his hand, and threw away the stone lock on the ground with a loud thud. The entire square shook lightly with its impact. Shi Mu raised his hand to study his fingers closely. His lean and long fingers were sturdy. But, they didn't look as if they had the strength to lift a weight of 500 kilograms. Shi Mu thought for a moment. He then walked to a wooden shelf in order to take out a long saber. The saber's movement created a succession of flashing shadows. They began to explode above the square. The overwhelming energy sent sand and stones flying in all directions. Whiz! A white whip rolled and struck a wooden target. Pa! Pa! A series of sounds were heard as the target crashed to the ground with 7 cuts. One movement, 7 cuts. 7 cuts in one movement. This was exactly one greater than what Li Qinghai had showed him. He had surpassed his instructor's record within a night's time by managing 7 cuts. The shadows made by the sun disappeared as the evening arrived. Shi Mu stood at the same spot with the saber in hand. He seemed to be lost in thoughts. Soon, it was night. The heavy wooden door of the room was closed. The room was large and austere, but didn't have any decorations. Shi Mu lay on the bed in the center of the room, his eyes were closed. His skin had a tinge of red to it, he was sweating heavily. He was curled up in a half-conscious state. He continued to twitch and murmur. His groans died down after an indefinite amount of time. He then began to stretch his body slowly. He opened his tired eyes as his skin returned to its normal color. Shi Mu took a few deep breaths. Then, he got off the bed in order to exercise. He flexed his fingers, and clutched the edge of the bed. Kaka! The solid wooden edge was crushed with a clean sound. My strength has increased, but not as much as the last time. The effect lasts less than a quarter of an hour, even after an interval of 1 month. It seems that I won't make a lot of progress next time, Shi Mu murmured. The amazing change had started taking place as soon as he had moved into the manor. It had taken place on more than one occasion. The strength that he had displayed earlier in the day had come from this change. Moreover, it had sharpened his practice of the saber art. The first mutation had occurred within the first month of his arrival. It had tormented his body for an entire night. However, the pain had disappeared by the next day. But, his body had been left with more strength and elasticity. The second mutation had taken place 2 nights later. This pattern took place a total of 10 times. But, the benefits of the reward were accompanied by an intense amount of pain. Shi Mu had begun to notice that the duration of each mutation was decreasing. The intervals were becoming longer, and his strength was starting to stagnate. The growth this time was negligible in comparison to the first few mutations. However, the achievements were still quite extraordinary. But, Shi Mu's body had responded quicker than other people's. So, he had been able to lift a weight of more than 500 kilograms. He was quick to figure out that these mutations had something to do with the huge clam that he had saved from the seabed. The process of mutations always stirred up spasms of pain in his body. They were similar to what he had felt that day on the beach. He had been cured by the clam girl while he was in coma. He had awakened due to a feeling of blood boiling inside him. The one difference that he felt now was that the pain of mutation was 10 times as sharp as the pain he had felt back then. However, Shi Mu was secretly happy due to this boost in his strength. He had been envious of others when they told him about the fortuitous events that had befallen them. But now, a fortunate event had occurred in his favor. This filled him with a new kind of confidence and yearning for the fierce competition he was supposed to face at the Kaiyuan martial arts school's enrollment test. Shi Mu had learned from Li Qinghai that acquiring qi sensing wouldn't be enough, and that the competition could still be difficult for him. After all, there were limited resources at the Kaiyuan martial arts school. So, only a few candidates could pass the enrollment test out of the innumerable aspirants. Moreover, it was evident from the past competitions that the number of aspirants from each prefecture was at least a few multiples of what the school eventually enrolled. Shi Mu was aware of his mediocrity. He knew that he wouldn't have a great chance at qi sensing despite the aid of the qi ling pill. However, Li Qinghai had told him that one had a better shot at succeeding in qi sensing once one crossed the 9th level in body tempering. In fact, even a person with low comprehension would be successful 1 out of 3 times if one crossed the 10th level. It would come as a surprise if Shi Mu failed to acquire qi sensing after accomplishing all the 13 levels of body tempering. Therefore, some of the inferior martial disciples were able to sense qi in their 30s or even 40s. But, only the rich could afford such a wonder, as very few had the time and money for such an investment. Moreover, there would be little time left for further studies if one didn't acquire qi sensing until middle age. Then, the difficulty of becoming an intermediate Houtian warrior would be tripled, as the prime of a warrior would already be wasted. In that case, becoming an advanced Houtian warrior would be out of the question. But, some aristocrats collected rare herbs to help with their qi sensing. However, its cost was much more than that of the qi ling pill. In fact, even Li Qinghai had failed in reaching the Houtian stage before the age of 15. He had finally managed to reach the 12th level in body tempering in his 20s. He had to take a qi ling pill twice before he finally managed to become a Houtian warrior. But, it was impossible for Shi Mu to collect rare herbs. Therefore, the only way for him to succeed was through body tempering. However, the time needed to advance to the next level increased exponentially after the 9th level. In fact, the required time exceeded the amount that the common people could afford to spend on training. So, it was impossible for common people to reach the 12th level. Only the people born with a great amount of talent could achieve this stage. But, the total number of such geniuses in the entire history of Da Qi could be counted on the fingers. However, the fortunate event that had befallen Shi Mu had allowed him to reach the 9th level. He was inching closer to the 10th level owing to the pain and sweat of each mutation. It could be argued that he could reach the 10th level within a year. But, it was hard to imagine that he would reach the 11th level. Moreover, Shi Mu didn't wish to gamble a qi ling pill with a mere 1/3 chance of succeeding. So, he hadn't been able to feel relieved. He felt that he had no other choice but to resort to an insane approach that Li Qinghai had told him about. According to Li Qinghai, a martial art expert had passed down a special method of body tempering. It was simple and crude, but it yielded amazing results. However, the process was extremely dangerous and full of suffering. It was rarely ever imparted to martial disciples as there was a chance of a premature death during its practice. Instructor Li had hinted that he would teach everything he knew to Shi Mu, but only in exchange for a large tuition fee. Danger? What threat of danger could possibly scare Shi Mu? He had taken an oath to be the strongest warrior in front of his mother's tomb. However, his immediate goal was to master the stone-breaking fist art before he could concentrate on body tempering. Shi Mu was lost in thoughts. Suddenly, an idea dawned upon him. 7 days later, a 3-feet-high blue tank filled densely with yellow soybeans stood in the center of the manor square. Shi Mu stood shirtless before the tank. He wore a pair of oversized black trousers and a pair of thick silver gloves. Pa! Pa! He started to punch the soybeans in the tank. Listen! Your physical strength is the basis of power for the stone-breaking fist. But, the key to master this art is by toughening your fists. Otherwise, the strength that you use would only rebound from the stone. It'll result in a self-mutilation of your fists. You're only a beginner. So, the toughness of your fist can only battle wood at the moment. These gloves are made of layers of fish skin. They'll train your ligaments, tendons, and flesh, and will prevent your fists from any grave injury. I'll replace the beans with stones, and will take away one layer of fish skin from your gloves once you manage to punch through this tank and break it. You'll advance to the iron pellet sand once you manage to do the same with the stones. After that, real rock. Left hand. Don't wave it so far. Elbow. Keep it tucked. Good. Good. Li Qinghai explained with a poker face. His arms were folded. Yes. Shi Mu answered as he continued to move his arms. Each of his punches sunk half an inch deep into the tank. His upper body was sweating profusely. Each of his muscles trembled incessantly, as if he was engaged in a strange fanaticism. Shi Mu let out a shout after a quarter of an hour. He then punched the tank. His punch went at least 1 inch deep, and buried nearly half of his arm into the beans. Stop! Didn't I ask you to restrain your strength? Let me inspect your fists. They might be injured. Li Qinghai's expression changed. He was anxious as he scolded the young boy, and handed him a medicine bottle from his pocket. Master Li, I'm all right. Shi Mu grinned and pulled out his half-buried arm from the beans. Humph! Let me be the judge of that. Take off your glove, Li Qinghai snorted. Shi Mu swung his arm, and took off the layers of the glove. He then wiggled his reddish fingers in front of Li Qinghai. That's quite strange. Your hand look perfectly fine. I've been a teacher for years, I was expecting your fingers to be bleeding. Now, do this. Come over here, and pound this wooden target with your fists. Don't hold back this time. Instructor Li thought for some time. He then pointed towards a nearby thick stalk and said. He seemed amazed after studying Shi Mu's fist. Yes, Shi Mu said, and took a deep breath. He then walked to the stalk, and began to measure it in circles. After that, he stretched his arms. Then, his gaze sharpened in intensity. Boom! He then delivered a punch. It smashed the thick wooden target into 2 parts. The upper part went whizzing across the square, and collided with the outer wall of a house. The house quivered mightily with the impact. However, Shi Mu's fist had remained safe and sound. Chapter 7, Blood Warriors. Translator, Novel_Saga Editor, Novel_Saga. For a beginner, your growth has been amazing. I've never seen anything like it before. Could it be that you have inspired your blood, said Li Qinghai with an amazed look on his face, for he was completely taken aback by Shi Mu's performance. Inspired my blood? Shi Mu said, pausing. Haha, I'm just throwing a wild guess at you. You can't possibly be a blood warrior, for they are quite rare. You must have great inherent strength. However, it does seem as if your body was made to practice the stone-breaking fist, said Li Qinghai as he shook his head and smiled silently, for he was finding it hard to speak. Master Li, who are these blood warriors? Shi Mu asked out of curiosity. Well, it is hard to explain. Some Houtian warriors manage to stimulate a special kind of blood in their veins. Such warriors are called blood warriors, and this ability comes as a natural process. In order to even have a chance, a warrior needs to be born with it. Barely 1 in a million warriors is able to achieve this. As a martial disciple, it is next to impossible to stimulate your blood vessels. The Kai Yuan Martial Arts School will be able to help you learn more about the blood warriors, so prepare to get enrolled. Blood warriors are often regarded as demons because they have the ability to annihilate any other warrior of the same level. You must remember that they are, in fact, hated for their talents. Being a blood warrior from a powerful family may be a fortunate occurrence, but otherwise blood warriors are usually assassinated at an early age. In fact, I recall that there are a few blood warriors among the candidates this year. Li Qinghai said, waving off the topic with a brief explanation, showing an obvious indifference. Shi Mu nodded and did not inquire further, but memorized every piece of information about the blood warriors, and his own mutation deep in his heart. It is true that you do have outstanding talents in the stone-breaking art. Anyway, I'd better quicken the pace, or the current exercise would become useless for you, said Li, and paused. But, there is no question about your talents, he added with a meaningful look at Shi Mu, along with a smile. Then Li Qinghai instructed some servants to fill the tank with sharp-looking stones. He took off another layer from the boy's gloves and ordered Shi Mu to continue practicing. This time, Shi Mu's fists began to feel the soreness almost immediately. A little while later, both fists began to sting. It felt as if a myriad of tiny needles lay hidden in the stones. Shi Mu turned to see Li Qinghai standing near him, and he was able to tell that instructor Li had no intention of making him stop. So Shi Mu continued to hit the stones with a wild energy, his teeth clenched as he struck at his usual pace. There is a good possibility that your ligaments and bones will get injured because of the violent and forceful nature of the stone-breaking fist method. Even with my secret medicine and your good aptitude, you must take a break for at least 4 days between each practice session. While you rest, you must continue to practice your body tempering and give your hands the chance to recover fully, so that you can move forward with your stone-breaking fist later. If you are successful in adhering to this schedule for half a year, there is a possibility that you will reach the intermediate level of accomplishment in this fist art, instructed Li Qinghai. Yes, Shi Mu said firmly, then threw another heavy punch into the stone tank, making it quiver slightly. The day subsided and the night fell. Shi Mu sat on the wooden chair in his room. His arms were resting on the table in front of him, with his hands bare without the gloves. His 10 fingers were swollen to twice their usual size and were as red as an apple. The swelling had left his skin extremely thin and transparent, exposing his veins underneath. Shi Mu smiled bitterly as he sat in this miserable state. Li Qinghai believed that the effectiveness of his practice in the day could be justified only by an injury of this extent. But even applying the ointment was quite an impossible task, considering the state of his hands. He contorted his face in agony as he attempted to take Instructor Li's medicine bottle out from his shirt. He opened the lid and generously applied the ointment onto his swollen palm. He swore out aloud as his head and back broke out in a cold sweat. The next morning, Shi Mu looked at his hands subconsciously as he woke up. He was left stunned. The hands that had been swollen a night ago were now completely healed, as if no harm had been done to them. Had it not been for the residue of light red blood stains on the back of his hands, he would have thought that he was dreaming. How could this be? It's impossible! Shi Mu blurted out in surprise, as he flexed his hands, feeling his fingers nimble and undamaged. Everything felt just fine and there was no trace of pain, making it seem as if yesterday's practice had just been a dream. He gazed at his hands in doubt, blinking his eyes. He then clutched the edge of the bed, exerting force through his fingers. Kaka! The chunk of wood broke into pieces. Shi Mu was astonished at the sight, but quickly recovered and jumped with excitement. He took a moment to calm down, and then thought to himself, "It looks like I'm fine. Could it be that I've somehow aroused a blood vessel inside my body? If that is the case, then it must be because of that huge clam. Perhaps it's all due to the blood fog. Though, as I have learned from Li Qinghai, it would not be a clever choice to reveal my talent right away. However, since my body is able to recover at this quick a pace, I believe I can practice the fist art every single day." It was the peak time of noon. Shi Mu's hands were tightly pinned together with white straps, and a heavy sandbag was tied around his waist and legs. He was running around the square wildly, and shortly he became drenched in sweat. Li Qinghai watched from a short distance, his face expressing satisfaction. In the afternoon, faint thuds could be heard from a room that was packed away deep inside the manor. Shi Mu was punching the stone tank wildly in the center of the large empty room. The white straps that he had been using to protect his hands were no longer present, and the gloves he now wore were thinner. He ignored the pangs in his fists, keeping his clenched mouth tightly shut, and continued punching the stones. Deep in the night, the boy was fast asleep. His face expressed exhaustion, and his arms were stretched to the far edges of the bed. His fists were extremely red and swollen, and were now covered with a thick layer of white ointment. One of his fingers twitched suddenly, and his face was gripped with a grain of pain, but he continued to sleep through it. "What? You want to try on iron this time?" Li Qinghai was quite taken aback. He blurted out the question in disbelief, his eyes wide open. "That's right. I remember that Master Li once talked about an alternative art of body tempering, the speed of which was much faster than that of any other method. I wish to learn it. I have a good chance of finishing level 11 before the enrollment test. Moreover, with the aid of a Qi Ling pill, I would have a better chance of attaining Qi sensing," Shi Mu said in a rather calm voice. His hands were once again covered with thick layers of white straps. "I have said this before. But I will repeat myself. Are you really aware of the danger of such a method? Despite its benefits, this method is dangerous and will require you to invest a huge amount of resources. Not to forget, you will risk dying every time you practice it," Li Qinghai said with much severity. "I'll do anything to reach the 11th level within a year. I don't care about money or danger. Master Li, all I ask of you is to teach me." His face grim with determination, Shi Mu bowed and said. "Well, I've already told you all the possible consequences. I have no reason not to teach you if you continue to insist. But this method requires some outside help in its first few stages. So you will have to come to our school. Will that be a problem?" "Not at all. To save myself the hassle of commuting, I will live in the city and continue my training," Shi Mu said, immediately coming up with the idea. "Your best option is to live near the club. Well then, we will resume our lesson tomorrow. Bring 1,000 silver notes to the club tomorrow. I will go back to the school today and make the necessary preparations for you. Hey, you'll get your money's worth. As the name may suggest, this method of body tempering will temper your body as if it were made of iron, enhancing it with great force. During this period, you will go through a great deal of suffering and pain. You must take medicinal baths every day as per my instructions. Your body will break down if you attempt to skip these daily baths. Once you complete this, I'll have nothing left to teach you at the martial disciples level." Li Qinghai smiled, nodding in agreement. Shi Mu listened to the instructions obediently. Li Qinghai continued to teach Shi Mu some other strength-based skills for the rest of the day, and then left with a few parting words. Shi Mu immediately asked for Zhang Suo, who was responsible for the manor's affairs. He requested a clean and vacant house to be rented for his residence in the city, for the period of his training. Zhang Suo dutifully promised to run the errand, and then hurried away with some silver notes to do as he was asked. Chapter 8, A Corpse Attacks the Old Temple. Translator, Novel_Saga Editor, Novel_Saga. Half a year later. On a remote, deserted mountain road in the suburb of Feng City. It was raining heavily, with the raindrops thudding hard against the ground. Loud crashes of dull thunder could be heard in the distance from time to time. Bolts of lightning flashed vividly, lighting up the sky in a stark white flash. A man was seen running wildly like a leopard. Each leap that he took must have been at least 5 times that of an ordinary person. It only took him a moment to cross a small hill, and then he was directly on his way to the thick woods nearby. Shortly afterwards, he disappeared into the woods and a shadow flashed about. An intense rumbling noise was heard. Boom! More than a dozen large trees slowly fell to the ground. A clean cut had slashed through their trunks. Just then a sudden lightning bolt flashed, revealing the man in the light. He wore a straw hat, and a straw raincoat. As the darkness returned, the man disappeared again. 2 hours later, the gate to a broken and worn-down temple on the hill was thrown open, leaving a trail of heavy footsteps. They belonged to a man carrying a huge object on his shoulder. As he pushed the door open, heavy raindrops and gusts of wind rushed inside the temple. 2 travelers were seen sitting around a bonfire in the center of the hall. On hearing the disturbing noise, they turned around with astonishment to face the man. "Why are you visiting the temple? And is that my firewood?" the man in the straw hat questioned unhurriedly. The heavy object on his shoulder fell to the ground as he shook the raindrops from his raincoat. The 2 travelers consisted of a man and a girl. The man, apparently in his 40s, looked poised, but it was clear that he had been worn out from his journey. The latter was a teenage girl, 14 or 15-year-old, with fair skin. She was beautiful by all standards, and had a fairly noticeable blue birthmark, a blemish on her otherwise perfect face. "Ah, that's your firewood. I'm sorry, I mistook this temple to be uninhabited. The firewood was lying around, and I just used it to make a fire. My daughter and I were completely soaked in the rain. But don't worry, young boy, I will definitely compensate you for the firewood and shelter." The middle-aged man stood up hurriedly to offer his apology, but his eyes were fearfully focused on the huge object on the ground. On the ground lay the corpse of a brown boar, weighing at least 500 kilograms. The animal had died quite recently, as could be concluded from the stark white color of its eyes, the still bleeding mouth, and its 2 huge broken fangs. The wood was chopped so it could be used. "So use it," the figure in the straw hat walked up to the travelers. The light of the bonfire revealed a boy with thick brows and huge eyes, carrying a long blade. It was none other than Shi Mu. "Then, I must thank you for your hospitality. Please call for me if you are in need of anything. I am surnamed Zhong." The middle-aged man could not help but answer in haste at the boy's offer. He was smiling profusely, and did not relax until he was assured that he had repeatedly expressed his gratefulness. He then went back to the bonfire and began comforting the girl. The girl in the blue dress secretly stole a glance at Shi Mu, with a tender look on her face. By then Shi Mu had put away the saber, as well as his raincoat. An unexpected sight lay beneath his clothes, for he wore a thick, black iron armor. The armor covered his torso entirely, leaving only his neck and arms exposed. "Is that the famous black armor?" the middle-aged man asked, stunned at the sight. "You know about this armor?" It was Shi Mu's turn to be surprised. "Haha, I once saw a blacksmith forge this armor with my own eyes, to tell you the truth. That's why it made a deep impression on me. How much does your armor weigh?" The blacksmith had told me that this armor was not used for defense in fights because of its brittleness. "The armor is used simply to help warriors in training their bodies," the man answered, smiling. "The one I'm wearing at the moment does not weigh a lot, or it would have been difficult for me to move." Shi Mu waved the question off, grasping one side of the armor with some strength. The black armor cracked into 2 pieces, and Shi Mu threw it onto the ground with ease. The 2 pieces fell to the ground with a thud, causing the ground to tremble. The middle-aged man found himself blinking his eyes twice. "Not a lot?" That must be a joke, for the weight had to be remarkable. The armor must have weighed at least 200 or 300 kilograms. It would require a huge monster to support the armor only through brute strength. This boy had to be rather strong for his age, and his level in body tempering is sure to be quite high. Shi Mu's body began to relax as he undid the black armor's straps. Once he was done, he cut the 2 front legs of the boar in the blink of an eye. The legs were illuminated by a golden light before they were skinned quickly and completely. Then the boy took out a small bottle from his clothes. He sprinkled some white powder from the bottle onto the boar's legs, and then carried them to the bonfire. A strong and delicious smell began to fill the whole temple after some time. The 2 travelers who sat around the bonfire had been eating their prepared dried food, but found themselves drawn to the strong smell of the sizzling boar legs. The girl could not help but drool, but at once found it ungraceful. She lowered her head, hiding the blush on her face. Shi Mu noticed this and, taking her by surprise, passed her the half-done leg with a quiet smile. "That's too much. We've already used your firewood, we can't possibly take your meat as well," said the middle-aged man, overjoyed. His words were refusing the offer, but his hands willingly and shamelessly accepted it. "Father," the girl beside him said, in a shameful tone. "There is plenty of meat for everyone, don't you see? This young boy is obviously a strong warrior, and such a small offer wouldn't bother him," the man answered his daughter, grinning. "All right then, but thank you, young master," the girl blushed in meek acceptance at her father's impoliteness, thanking Shi Mu. "You're welcome. It's not a problem. In any case, this boar is too big for me to eat alone," Shi Mu turned to the girl and answered with a smile. He had already skinned another leg of the boar by then. "By the way, young boy, Feng City is not too far from here, right? We have come from Ying City to stay with our relatives living in Feng City. We lost our way in the mountains when the rain started pouring, and then it got dark," said the middle-aged man, inquiring about the way. He was smiling brightly, trying to rip a piece of meat for his daughter. "I see. I was wondering what brought the 2 of you to this deserted temple at such a late hour. Uncle Zhong, don't worry, Feng City is not very far from here. You'll see the west gate of the city if you walk along the road that goes straight from the temple for about 2.5 kilometers, Shi Mu answered unthinkingly, finally understanding the reason for their presence in the temple. "That's great. Shiu, did you hear that, my child? We can reach Feng City by tomorrow itself, and then soon you'll be married into the Wu family," said the middle-aged man, overjoyed. "Father, stop it! Can't you see our present condition? I look terrible right now, so there is a high chance that they might cancel the engagement," said the girl, blushing with shame at her father's mention of her engagement. "Terrible? That's nonsense. My daughter is the most intelligent and beautiful girl in the whole world. Humph, it is because of the wuss that we are now in such a state. Don't worry my Shiu, I'll talk to the wuss about your engagement," the middle-aged man said, clearly disapproving of his daughter's self-abasement. A bell went off in Shi Mu's head. The Wu family? Could they be talking about the powerful Wu clan, second only to the Jin? But the stature of the father and daughter did not indicate that they could be strong enough to be warriors. As the man was talking to his daughter, and Shi Mu was cooking next to them, a shrill howl was heard in the distance, and a short while later, another loud sound was heard, not too far from the temple. Within a moment, a large figure approached the temple, having covered a great distance. "What is that? Are there monsters in these mountains?" the man asked, scared out of his wits. He stood up and fumbled for a dagger in his clothes. He managed to take out the sharp weapon which shone in the cold. He stood in front of his daughter to protect her, though he was terribly scared himself. His legs were trembling, making it evident that he would not last even a minute in a fight. "It is not a monster, or at least not a monster from this mountain. I've never heard a howl like this one before," Shi Mu said, reaching swiftly for the saber lying beside the bonfire. His eyes shone as he glared at the temple gate, which seemed to be going dark, threateningly. Shi Mu expectantly waited for the unknown, for he had trained himself by hunting wild animals in the mountain for half a year. He had not done so for entertainment, but to acquire the experience of actual combat. Moreover, he had continued to train in body tempering. Shi Mu had managed to kill at least 100 wild wolves and boars in the mountains, although it was a rather tame place when one considered the animals living in it. Having killed such a large number of animals, he was way more experienced than his company, who shied away from blood. Though he wasn't a warrior, the middle-aged man was quite observant. Shi Mu's composure helped in calming him down a bit. Boom! The already half-broken gate was burst open from the outside. A human figure rushed into the hall, accompanied by a shower of splinters. His skin was black from head to toe. This is a zombie. A real zombie. Good heavens! Where has this thing come from? What are the armies in Feng City doing? We are dead, the man said as he recognized the monster, already half dead with fright. A zombie? Shi Mu's blood froze when he saw the figure. The monster was at least 3 meters tall, its face badly mutilated, with 2 big bloody holes carved where the eyes should have been. The entire body of the monster was covered with a thick layer of black hair. A nauseating smell emerged from the drops of green fluid that were dripping from its body intermittently. Chapter 9, Killing the Corpse. Translator, Novel_Saga Editor, Novel_Saga. Shi Mu was surprised by the zombie's unexpected appearance. This allowed it to pounce on him with a loud howl. A smell of rancid rotten fish was emanating from its body. Shi Mu took a deep breath, cleared his mind, and immediately wielded his saber. His wrists moved actively as he handled the saber, generating a strong and cold light which soared forward. Pang! Shi Mu slashed the monster's chest 5 times in quick succession. But the dull cuts seemed as if they had fallen onto a dead tree, and left nothing but a few shallow wounds, barely grazing the surface. Drops of green blood trickled out of the wounds, but to no real effect. The corpse spread its arms wide and pushed Shi Mu down with force. Shi Mu was astonished beyond his wits. Up until this point, he was entirely sure about the strength and experience he had gained from running wildly in the rain, wearing the heavy black armor. He did not require any previous knowledge of martial arts to wriggle out of the grasp of the monster's thick arms. Then, he quickly turned to face its back. Ha! Shi Mu shouted as he struck the monster's waist 5 times with his saber, before it had a chance to react. The monster howled in anger when inflicted with these superficial wounds. The 3 spectators were left shocked as it wrenched its body backwards, turning its upper body 180 degrees around. Then, it violently pounced on Shi Mu's head. Boom! It was impossible for Shi Mu to dodge this attack, for he had not anticipated it. Shi Mu frantically began attacking with his knife, but was met with a powerful force in return, which sent his whole body flying. A broken stone column abruptly stopped his flight. As Shi Mu began to rise, he coughed out blood, feeling rather lightheaded. The corpse rushed forward and attacked low for the second time, giving Shi Mu no chance to escape. Shi Mu did not attempt to dodge the attack this time, but shouted as he struck out with the saber and delivered 6 different cuts. The fierce successive cuts gave out a dull sound. The force used by the boy had been so immense that the knife flew upwards at the collision, before finally finding its way into a crossbeam. As for Shi Mu, he was thrust backwards by the collision. The monster let out a shrill sound as the force of the violent attack pushed him backwards as well. It had 4 new scars on its arms, and another 2 long ones on its face, oozing out a large amount of green blood. A thought struck the middle-aged man, and he shouted anxiously to Shi Mu, "Young brother, the head is its weakness." What he did not expect, however, was that his voice would attract the monster's attention towards him. The monster directed its anger, now, to the annoying helper standing by the fire. The monster was well aware that, alone, Shi Mu was anything but an easy prey. No, the middle-aged man was scared out of his wits. However, he bravely stood his ground in front of his daughter, and cast out the dagger at the monster. He then turned around to tightly hold the girl to his chest, in order to act as her armor. The monster brushed away the dagger as easily as if it was dust. And with its other hand, it ripped open the man's chest, its sharp fingers halfway into his body. "Ah!" the man shouted in pain as his blood gushed out. His daughter grew pale and, on seeing her father in pain, began screaming in despair. Then something strange happened. The monster had opened its rotten mouth and was lowering its head, but the girl's screams made him tremble, forcing a sudden shout out of him. It withdrew its arms from the man's chest and staggered back, as if some unknown agony had taken possession of him. Seizing the opportunity, Shi Mu rushed to the monster's back, his movement stirring a sudden puff of wind and dust. He jumped 3 meters high and began punching the monster's head mercilessly. Boom! His 2 fists were like iron hammers at the forge, aiming right at the monster's weakness. An exploding sound was heard with each hit, such was his superhuman strength. Innumerable drops of green blood began to splatter in all directions, as the monster's head was split open like a melon. Shi Mu moved back so as to not come in contact with the ominous green-blooded rain. The corpse twitched twice, and then fell heavily on the ground. Shi Mu steadied his body and clenched his fists, his face losing a bit of its color. The mortal wound had been delivered in less than a moment. However, Shi Mu would not have succeeded in killing the monster if it hadn't been disturbed by the girl's sudden scream. That being said, his superhuman strength undoubtedly had a huge part to play in the success. He had acquired it because of his nearly accomplished stone-breaking fist. No ordinary disciple would have been able to injure the monster's head with bare hands, despite it being his weakest point. "Father!" the girl called out grievously. Shi Mu turned to see the mortally wounded man. His daughter was leaning over his body, trying desperately to stop the blood coming out of the large holes in his chest. Her hopeless efforts were made redundant by his ceaseless bleeding. Young boy," said the pale-faced middle-aged man, as he called out desperately to Shi Mu, ignoring his own daughter. "Stop talking, father! Save your energy while I find a doctor for you," the girl cried. "It's too late, Shiu. I have enough medical knowledge to know that. My heart has no strength now, and I have but a few moments left. My life has given me plenty of good times, but I have one regret today before dying. That regret is you," the man smiled bitterly in response, casting an anxious glance at Shi Mu. Her father's words broke the girl's heart. "Uncle Zhong, do you have any last wishes?" Shi Mu lowered his body as he walked up to the man, sighing in despair. He was quick to understand that trouble was to follow, but knew that it was impossible to avoid it now. "Little brother, it must have been destiny that made me meet you here. Now that my life's ending, I can't bear the thought of leaving my little Xiu all alone in this world, unprotected. So please look after her," the man said, gasping for breath. "There's no need for me to look after your daughter. Is she not engaged to be married into the Wu family? Although, I can promise to escort her there," Shi Mu said, surprised at the request. "The Wus? Haha! I would have found a way to get her married into the family if I was alive, but now, they will no longer acknowledge the engagement. My daughter will only be. Then I shall take her to your other relatives," Shi Mu frowned, interrupting. "We have had no relatives ever since our family came into poverty. My little Xiu, listen, you no longer have an engagement with the Wus. Little brother, you are obviously no average man. I do not ask you to take my daughter as your wife, but please at least let her be your concubine. I can rest in peace only if she lives safely. As a warrior, this family heirloom will be of use to you. Take it as my daughter's betrothal gift. If you cause her any harm, I will become a vengeful spirit and curse you," the middle-aged man said quickly in his last moments. He then produced a wooden case from his shirt and thrust it forcibly into Shi Mu's hands. After a loud cry, he stopped breathing. "Father, the girl cried. Her father's words had left her too surprised to weep. But his death forced tears out of her eyes, and she wept as she leaned over his body. Shi Mu was speechless, and had no idea what to do about the matter. Young master, my father was quite delirious in his last moments. Don't take his words seriously. Please escort me to the Wu clan in Feng City. The girl stopped crying after some time. Her eyes were swollen, but her back was now straight and firm. Miss Zhong, I do believe that it would be quite rude of me to do as Uncle Zhong asked. Also, please take this case back. The girl's words relaxed him a bit. He sighed and passed the case back to the girl, seeming quite embarrassed. I've never seen this case myself. But I will not take it back, for my father gave it to you in person. Besides, I would not be alive if it weren't for you, the girl said, declining the offer. All right then, Miss Zhong. Don't address me as young master anymore. My name is Shi Mu, and you can call me that. Well, the rain has stopped. We must bury your father now, or animals may find their way here because of the body, Shi Mu said after a moment's hesitation, taking the case back. Then I'll rely on you for help. Brother Shi, you may call me Zhong Xiu from now on, the girl said. The girl had gained strength after crying, though still seeming fragile. On the hill behind the temple, the girl knelt beside a tomb and made 3 loud kowtows to her father, suppressing her anguish. Later, she left with Shi Mu, turning back once to see the tomb. The two returned to the temple to find that the monster's body had begun to rot at an alarming speed. The hall was polluted with a stinking smell, the source being the large amount of green fluids which were leaving the monster's body. The scene scared Zhong Xiu, and she was too frightened to take a single step. Shi Mu frowned and said, "It's unsafe to leave this strange thing here. Miss Zhong, please wait here for a moment while I deal with it." The girl nodded in agreement. Shi Mu then walked out of the hall, and returned after a while with a bunch of thick leaves in his hand. He walked up to the body with the huge leaves, covered it briefly, and lifted the corpse out of the hall. Pa! Something fell from the leaves. Chapter 10, The Wu Family. What? Shi Mu exclaimed as he stared at what seemed to be a black iron plate decorated with delicate patterns. The patterns looked like characters, but Shi Mu couldn't recognize even one out of the many. Miss Zhong, have you seen this thing before? He curiously picked it up, tossed and turned it over and over, and read it several times, but could not help his curiosity and asked Zhong Xiu. I am seeing it for the first time. It must have belonged to the zombie. As zombies were also once human, it is not strange for them to carry certain human objects, the girl said as she came up to look at the object, making an effort to suppress the nausea caused by the decaying corpse. Shi Mu nodded and, after some hesitation, stored the iron piece away. He then carried the leaf-covered body out of the hall. Soon after that, they were on their way to the city. Shi Mu could not resist asking Zhong Xiu about the shriek that had made the zombie recoil. Shi Mu did not persist once he realized that Zhong Xiu was equally baffled by it. Since it was late in the day and the west gate of the city had already been closed, Shi Mu took the girl back to his suburban manor. In the evening, Shi Mu found himself resting in his room, observing the iron piece in his hand. At first glance, the piece seemed as if it were made out of common black iron. A closer study, however, revealed that it was heavier than expected and was particularly cold to touch. Moreover, upon further examination, the delicate decorations seemed to portray a kind of primitive simplicity, creating a sense of mystery and fascination. Shi Mu could tell that it was not an ordinary object. But after studying it for a long time, he carefully put it away, for he was still unsure of its origin. Then he took out the wooden case that Uncle Zhong had given him right before his death. It seemed that the Zhongs were no ordinary family, which meant that their heirloom would be something special as well. Shi Mu opened the case and found a thick book inside, its pages already yellowed by time. On its cover, 4 characters in red were written as such: Zhong Gong Mi Dian, the secret arts of the Zhong clan. A little surprised, Shi Mu pulled the book out to get a better look. There were a total of 300 pages in the book. Tiny black characters were printed on all of them, some of which were vividly illustrated. A brief glance at the first few pages brought a wave of shock to Shi Mu's face. He sucked in a cold breath, and sank into silence because of the book's contents. The book was divided into two parts. The first part narrated a great number of methods that could be used to make rare weapons, while the second part gave instructions on how to produce delicate tools and poisons. Both parts were way beyond Shi Mu's imagination, considering their obscurity and mystery. Shi Mu found a weapon called the Black Stone Poison Sword, which was ordinary in shape but was empty from inside. This enabled one to infuse the sword with a large amount of poison. When used in combat, after 3 or 5 moves, the sword would splinter, splattering poison on the enemy. Another weapon, which was a small crossbow named Crossbow Arrow, was even nastier to use. This hidden weapon was to be worn on the back. In order to use it, one had to bow before the person they intended to kill, and then slightly pull on a strap hidden inside their cuff. 3 arrows would then shoot out from the crossbow towards the target, killing them before they could even get a chance to be aware of the attack. The different kinds of poisons in the book ranged from those which could knock people unconscious, to those whose deadly effects matured with time. There were, therefore, a variety of poisons in the book. I really wonder what it was the Zhongs did that required them to develop such foul things. The worn-out condition of the book suggests that it must have been passed down from the earliest of ancestors, Shi Mu thought to himself. This book was a real eye-opener for Shi Mu. If he could manage to memorize its contents, it would be of great help to him. It would especially benefit him when he had to deal with people with similar skills. His attention was also drawn to some other things that were recorded in the book. He turned the pages quickly to find an illustration of 2 weapons, a large and a small one, placed one above the other. The larger one was a slightly arched single-edged knife, with a long enough handle to be held with both hands. A black string was seen faintly resting around the handle. The smaller one was a tiny, yet incredibly sharp-looking dagger. Shi Mu gazed at the illustration, lost in deep thought. The next morning, Shi Mu arrived at a certain street in Feng City along with a swollen-eyed Zhongxiu. There was a spectacularly huge manor on one side of the street, covering more than half a square kilometer in area. Shi Mu walked up to knock on the blue door, which had a golden door plate with a huge Wu engraved on it. "Who's knocking at the door at such an early hour? Even the sun has not risen yet," said a man impatiently, as he finally opened the door. He looked like he was a servant, and he stepped out to look at the 2 visitors. "This girl is your relative. Would you please tell the others that she has arrived?" Shi Mu passed a jade plate to the servant as he said this. "Our relative?" "Wait a moment," the man said, half convinced. He then took the jade plate and closed the door. The door was opened again soon thereafter. This time, 2 men emerged from within. The man who led the way was a long-bearded old man, while the one behind him was a boy of Shi Mu's age. The boy resembled the old man in appearance, but he had an air of arrogance and pride about him. "It really is my niece." "That's perfect. I've been waiting for you for a long time, ever since I got your letter. But where is my brother Zhong? And who might this be?" The pale old man smiled at the sight of Zhongxiu, but seemed rather surprised at Shi Mu's presence. The eyes of the boy behind the old man flashed in disgust as he looked at Zhongxiu, noticing the blue birthmark on the girl's forehead. "This is young Master Shi. I lost my father on the way. It's only because of young Master Shi that I have managed to reach here," Zhongxiu said as she greeted the old man in a polite and graceful manner, her eyes shining with tears. "What? Has some misfortune befallen brother Zhong? Wait. This is not the place to talk about things such as this. Would you please follow me inside?" he said, apparently astonished by the news. He was quick to comfort the girl and lead her inside. The girl nodded. "Oh, I nearly forgot about this young boy," Thank you for bringing my niece here. Here is a reward for you, the old man said, frowning. He took another glance at Shi Mu and passed him a silver coin. Thank you, but I don't need it. As Zhongxiu has reached her destination, my work here is finished, Shi Mu said and left, declining the offer. What a proud bastard! I've seen many guys like him. They act as if they are too good for our money, but in their hearts, they want it just as much, the young man snorted. Brother Shi is definitely not one of them, Zhongxiu said in a low voice. The pale old man only smiled as he led the two inside. After he had left Zhongxiu at the Wu residence, Shi Mu crossed a few streets before he finally reached a building with a sign that read Lu Feng Martial Arts Club. He walked through the gate and saw that approximately 10 teenage boys were practicing with weapons. Brother Shi Mu is here, two boys immediately walked up to greet him, as he walked inside the building. One of the boys seemed as if he was 20 years old, and the other one looked to be around 16. Brother Feng, Brother Gao, you are here as well. Shi Mu greeted them happily, though he had not expected them to be present. We are here to see the newly obtained medicines for body tempering. We were wondering if they might be of use to us since we heard that they were quite cheap. But Brother Shi has no need for them, for he must have finished his body tempering by now, said the older boy, who looked rather elegant. I heard Instructor Li say that you will reach level 10 very soon. Is that true? The younger one asked with a flicker of doubt in his eyes. A deep knife cut had left a scar on his left eyebrow. Shi Mu had gotten to know the boys after his first visit to the club. The elder boy's name was Feng Li, and the younger was called Gao Yuan. It's true, I'm nearing level 10. I am not here for the medicine. I have to ask Instructor Li about some problems I have been facing, Shi Mu answered with a smile. So the rumor is true. It sure seems like Brother Shi will be able to acquire Qi sensing at such an early age. Instructor Li is right to call you a real talent. Hey, we should get a drink sometime soon at your restaurant to celebrate. Feng Li sighed, surprised. Gao Yuan also seemed to be admiring Shi Mu. That sounds like a great idea, Shi Mu said, agreeing. He left after exchanging some pleasantries. But as he was leaving, Feng Li gave him a meaningful look. Shi Mu observed the look with a quiet understanding, his expression only changing for a moment. He then walked to a yard behind the practice ground. He found Li Qinghai resting in a wooden armchair. His eyes were half closed, as if he were deep in thought. As Li saw Shi Mu come in, he smiled and rose from his chair. Master Li, are we going to ask those senior martial disciples for help this time? Shi Mu asked after bowing. There is no need. Only I can help, as it is a crucial time for you before you reach the 11th level. You haven't told anyone else about your real level, right? Li Qinghai asked, his voice and manner relaxed. Of course not. I've been following Master's instructions. Everyone believes that I'm only at the intermediate stage of level 9, Shi Mu answered with a smile. Good. Good. Then they will definitely be surprised at the competition in half a month. Our Feng Lu club will far outshine the rest of the 3 clubs, Li Qinghai said, giving a pleased smile.